Hello friends, welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time here. My name's Bella. And in this week's video, I thought we could do a little reading wrap up and TBR for next month. So this is gonna be my February reading wrap up and my March TBR, just in time, the first week of March. Yeah, I know this might be a little bit repetitive. I know about 2 videos ago I did a reading wrap up, but you know, we're just getting our sea legs here. We're working on it. We're making it work. So anyway, I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate you watching. I always appreciate any comments, any thoughts, things like that. But yeah, I hope you will stick around. Next week, we're gonna have a reading vlog, our very first reading vlog. So I'm very excited about that. And yeah, let's just dive right in. So I have here for my January, listen to me. For my February reading wrap up, the first book I finished in February was From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. And let me tell you, I loved this book. I rated it 4.25 stars. And I am really the only reason I gave it the 4.25 rating versus a 5-star or something a little bit higher is because I felt like some of the tropes were a little bit repetitive. Maybe there were things that you see often in other fantasy books and things like that. But of course, it's still a really high rating because that didn't change how much I enjoyed it. I did think originally when I started reading this that this had come out like back in the day, like in the 2010s. I don't know why I thought that. So when I first started reading it, I was thinking this was like one of the first ones that did some of these tropes, like, you know, the enemies to lovers, secret identity, some of those different kinds of things. And then when I realized that this came out in 2020, I was like, okay, so maybe we're doing a little bit of like, been there, done that, but not in a bad way. It was so fun. I would highly recommend it. I know this series is controversial. Spoiler alert, I have already read the second one that's also going to be in this wrap up, and the third one is going to be on the March TBR. So I think after the third one is when people really kind of start saying, I don't know. So far so good. I'm loving it. I did read these on my Kindle, but then I had to go out and buy trophies because, first of all, beautiful edition. I did nick this a little bit, unfortunately, whenever I was bringing it home, but we're gonna not look at that. Really beautiful edition, and it matches up perfectly with our next book I finished, which is the second book in the series, A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. This book I gave a 4.5. I did like this one a little bit more than the first one. I think because obviously in a second fantasy book in a series, you're diving right into the story. You don't have to do the world building. You don't have to do the build up. And we kind of have a bit of a third act breakup in the first book. And then this book kind of picks up where we left off, and we get to follow our characters on kind of a whole new journey, going to whole new places. This is recorded some in the reading vlog that I did. I read about half this book in the reading vlog, and let me just tell you, like, oh, my reactions in that, like, wow, this book shook me. The ending was crazy. I mean, pretty much the whole thing, top to bottom, was just like fantastic. I think the world building in this book is very interesting. It's combining a lot of elements that I haven't seen combined before. Like, it has kind of a like old magic, like god situation, but then there's also like elemental features to it, which I think is really interesting. And so that's something that I have found to be really fun. I'm very excited to start the third one. I binged these 2. This wasn't even on my February TBR, but as soon as I finished this one, I had to dive right into this one. And so, yeah, in these books, we're following our main character, Poppy, who is the maiden. So she is, you know, basically this religious figure that is kind of put on a pedestal. She has to be perfect. She has to be pure, as you can imagine. And she's punished frequently for not fitting those standards by her like caregivers. So we kind of follow her journey of self-discovery, independence, finding herself, separating herself from, you know, her identity that she's been given to her identity as a real person. And our main character, our MMC, has a lot to do with that because he's one of the first people that like sees her as her and not as a like idol or a figure to be like worshipped or celebrated or like put up on this pedestal. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think that it almost even has like, you know, pieces of like dark romance in here, because there's some elements of like betrayal and things like that where you know, it would be really easy to just like cast off certain characters. But yeah, I think one of the things I really loved about these books is that they're imperfect characters, all of them. Even some of the people like in the first book that you think like you love the whole time, like they make mistakes, like they do things that are wrong, and they, you know, try to make amends for that like throughout the book and in the next book and things like that. So I think they're really good if you want like a classic fantasy, but you want it told in a, you know, very interesting way with characters that are going to feel real and not very like, I know some, like I feel like sometimes in fantasy you have like your main character who's like, you know, oh, I am, you know, for righteousness and whatever, and I feel like some, like, which is great, but I feel like sometimes they're not making realistic choices because they're making choices based on like being the hero. And sorry, I've got something in my hair, it's distracting me. And I feel like in reality, a lot of the people in fantasy books that I really like who become the hero are like the reluctant hero. Like they are kind of thrust into those roles because they don't want them, and so they're the perfect person for them. A great example, I talk about it, I'm pretty sure I've talked about it in every single video I've made, is Throne of Glass, which, did anybody watch the Sarah J. Maas Call Her Daddy podcast yesterday? Because I did, and hot damn. But anyway, that's not what I'm talking about right now. So yeah, but like in Throne of Glass, where you have our main character who kind of becomes the reluctant hero from a very realistic story, well, realistic for fantasy, but like a very realistic story of like pain and heartbreak and challenge, and like she's kind of at a point where she doesn't want to be the hero because she's had basically her whole life taken from her. And that's kind of where we're at with this main character as well, is she's like, I've never had anything for me, now I don't want to give myself to other people, which I think is very understandable. But I also think that it almost makes it even more admirable when they do like step up and do things that are heroic. So anyway, yeah, very highly recommend both of these books. I'm very excited to see if my opinion on this series changes, because right now I'm like, this is a 5-star series for me so far. So okay, all right, next let's get our Kindle booted up. The next book I finished in February was Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. Yeah, so Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I rated this 2.5 stars. This is not because I hated this book. I actually, for the first 60%, really enjoyed it. I would say it was probably at like a 3.5 or maybe even a 4, depending on how the ending had gone. So like I was probably sitting at like a 3.5 before I got to chapter 16. Now here's the thing. I know chapter 16 is like the big sexy scene that a lot of people love, and that's fine. But for me, it was uncomfortable, and it was also weird, and I did not like it at all. I think there were elements of it that I was kind of like, ooh yeah, spicy, sexy, fun. Obviously you're like happy that, you know, our characters are getting together, you know, but there were some elements of it, and I'm not even going to go into specific detail because I don't even want to think about it, but there were some elements of it that I felt were almost like uncomfortable in a weird way. I don't think that was the intention on behalf of the author, but when a female main character is described as teensy tiny the whole book, and then when we go into the sex scenes, there's struggle and things aren't working as they should, if you will, and it's giving virgin, but she isn't, so then I'm like, okay, so why is this such a challenge? Why are we like describing the challenge in great detail? Like, why are we like fantasizing and obsessing over how teeny tiny she is. Like, I don't know. It was giving weird and it was giving uncomfortable, and I was not into that at all. I think that from reading it, my perception is I think the author's intention was to communicate that sex can be uncomfortable, it can be awkward, it can be even painful at times. Everybody has to approach it in a way that works for them, and I think that is amazing, and I think we should communicate those stories. And I think sex in books doesn't have to always be, oh my gosh, so sexy and da 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 da, and like something you would see in a movie. Like, I love when sex in books is real. I just think that was making me question our male main character and his interests, and, you know, it was different than just realistic. It felt fetishizing to me for how small she was and things like that, and that was making me very uncomfortable. And it kind of spoiled the rest of the book for me, because I kind of feel like she put so much oomph in the first like 60% that after that scene, I kind of feel like we just were like, done. Like, after that chapter, I skimmed like the next 2 chapters. And when I say skimmed, I'm like, I like had each page, but I was like reading the dialogue, and I was so not invested in what was going on because I was so distracted by the weirdness of the previous scene. I also was like, feel like she kind of gave up a little bit on the plot. And we like rushed through the like entire ending of the book. I think the only slight redemption in the book in general was how the Tom situation is dealt with. I think that was handled well. But aside from that, I really was just like, girl, like, Allie Hazelwood, what is going on? Because I love Allie Hazelwood. I've talked at length about how much I love Bride and Mate. And they even, like, in those books, there is some, like, weird sex scenes, but they're weird in the sense of, like, biology is discussed, and they're, like, realistic. Obviously, they're, like, fantasy type books, so, like, realistic for that world. But, like, the sex isn't, like, picture perfect. Like, there's some awkward moments, there's some weird moments, especially when we're talking about like anatomy and like different people's anatomy and the way that that works. And I think that that's great. Like, I love a raw, realistic sex scene. I think it just needs to be done correctly. So I was really disappointed because, like I said, I had read 2 of her books before. I loved them. I had high hopes for this one, and it just fell really flat for me. I also think it was just like, there was a good bit of it that was a little bit like cheesy, and I was like open to looking over that, and I am open to looking over that in like a just fun, cheesy little romance, but it was like almost too much at the end. Like, it just like kind of felt like trope, and I was just like, okay, I'm done. Like, after that scene, like, it kind of like put a sour taste in my mouth, and then it just like, there wasn't anything to like redeem it. I think if I was being really generous, I could give it a 3, but the reason I put it to a 2.5 is because I would have a really hard time recommending it to somebody without giving them like a huge caveat of like, hey, this chapter sucks, and then the POV from the male main character's POV at the end didn't make it better. So I kind of like relived it twice, which was awful. And yeah, I just, overall, I think because I wouldn't recommend it like readily to a bunch of people, I gave it a 2.5. Now, here's the thing. Whenever I give a low review of a book, that has nothing to do with my thoughts on other people who read and like them. There are very few books that I feel like I would be like, why are you reading that? Like, to somebody, and it would be like if a book was like truly problematic. But if it's just a book that like didn't sit right with me, again, I do not think her intentions were to be weird. I think it just came across that way to me. So I think we all are gonna have different book tastes. We are gonna like different things. And we even had somebody, this was our book club book, we had somebody in our book club who loved it, and I, you know, more power to you, girl. Like, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. It just wasn't right for me. So anyway, the next book that I finished in the month of February was Your Knife, My Heart by Kaya Moranova. So in January, so last month, I read Leave Me Behind by Kaya Moranova, and that one, I think I gave like a 3.75. The ending kind of threw me off on that one. This one, significantly better. Significantly better. I rated this book, I think I rated it, Yes, I rated it a 3.75. So it was just shy of a 4 for me, mainly because some of it felt a little repetitive. I think in a dark romance, especially one that's so long where you have like actual like plot to it, sometimes the like dark romance elements can start to feel a little repetitive in my personal opinion. I do feel like the plot of this one was really, really good. I feel like it was very similar in like plot dynamic to Leave Me Behind. There tends to be like trials and things like that these characters have to like go through, and there's a lot of like death and shooting and and you can't trust anybody, like that kind of thing. So I felt like a little bit the plot was kind of a reworked version of the plot for Leave Me Behind, but I wasn't mad about it because it was unique enough that it was like entertaining. I wanted to know what the story, like where the story was going. And there is a second book to this that I will be reading. I don't know if I'm gonna read it in March, maybe if I have some extra time. It wasn't like a big enough cliffhanger at the end that I was like, oh, I immediately need to jump in. And I wasn't like, oh, so good that I like wanted to immediately jump in, but I definitely will read it, especially if I'm in the mood for another dark romance. But yeah, I overall really enjoyed it. I enjoyed kind of our character development. I definitely want to learn a little bit more about our character backgrounds, and I think we will get a little bit more of that in the next book because there are still elements of their personalities that I do not understand. I do also think in dark romance, you kind of have to suspend your disbelief a little bit because there are elements of it as well that I'm just like, this doesn't really seem realistic. But aside from that, I do think, like I said, it was very entertaining. The plot was really good. I was excited to see where the story was going. I'm excited to read the next book. I do think like our character development was great. I think we see, especially our male main character, really learn to accept that somebody could care about him because I think he's been so like jaded in the past with the way people have treated him that he almost like cannot fathom somebody caring about him. So it almost takes him developing feelings for our FMC before he even rationalizes that like having those feelings makes sense. Like he won't take her word for it when she's like, oh, I have feelings. He's like, no, that's not possible. And then he kind of reciprocates and is like, okay, so it is possible. Which I do think is kind of an interesting dynamic. You do get a little bit of like, you know, who is this character? Like the MMC doesn't know who the FMC is, like kind of at the beginning. So he has to kind of like learn her identity and things like that, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, there was a lot of like really clever plot points that I really enjoyed. I just think that because it's taking place like in the Dark Forces world, a lot of those elements I felt like were very, very similar. And we do see some characters that we get to know in the first book, or not the first book, but in Leave Me Behind. I do think I saw, like when I went to read this, I actually went to read this first before Leave Me Behind. And then I looked up on TikTok and they were like, no, read Leave Me Behind first, read Leave Me Behind first. You don't need to. There's like 2 or 3 characters mentioned, but there's no spoilers and there's nothing that would change the way you feel about reading Leave Me Behind. You honestly probably won't even remember that the characters were mentioned because you don't know them. So the only really benefit of reading Leave Me Behind first would be when you get to Your Knife, My Heart. When they're mentioned, you're like, oh, there's so-and-so, which is like kind of fun. But this, Your Knife, My Heart takes place 10 years before the events of Leave Me Behind. So it's not even like you're seeing where they are now or like anything like that. That could be a spoiler. So just read it, you know, when you want to read it, if you want to read it. So anyway, okay, well, that wraps up the February wrap up. Yeah, so that wraps up the February wrap up, the books that I read in February. Now I am going to kind of switch gears a little bit and jump into my March TBR. Okay, so to kick off my March TBR, the first book that I will be reading, and actually, let me clarify, typically in a, like, when I make a TBR, I don't necessarily read them in a specific order because I'm such a mood reader, so these are just gonna be, like, the books I'm reading this month in no particular order. So please keep that in mind. But the first one I'm going to talk about is The Crown of Gilded Bones. For some reason, it's not like loading, but I'll put a picture here, but The Crown of Gilded Bones, which is Blood and Ash book 3. I actually have no idea what this book is about. I'm assuming it's following the events of the ending of book 2, because that was crazy. But I kind of like, especially in like a fantasy book, to go in a little bit blind. I also think that if I were to like read the synopsis, it would probably spoil some of it, because obviously this is the 3rd book. But essentially, I think we're just carrying on with our characters from the last book, and we will get to kind of follow them on a new journey. I will go ahead and quickly, let's quickly pull up the synopsis and just see. See, this one's also like super highly rated on Goodreads. I don't understand why people on like TikTok say that this is kind of when things go downhill. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Huge spoilers. So not gonna read that, but yeah, exactly what I said. We're just following the same events of, you know, where we left off in the last book. So that kind of explains that. Oh my gosh, you can see my like whole leg. You can see my like feet. Okay, that's better. Anyway, okay, so the next book that is on my March TBR is Insatiable, which is our book club read. That one's also on my Kindle, so I don't know why I put this down. So let me get my Kindle and pull it up. Who wrote this? I think it's Lee Rivers. Yes, Lee Rivers. So Insatiable is a dark romance where our MMC hates our MMC, but also doesn't want anybody else to have her. So it's a little bit of a like, if I can't have her, no one can, which, don't get me wrong, the concept of that in real life is not cute. But, you know, in a dark romance, we forgive a lot, you know, we forgive a lot. So far, I actually have started this one. Today is March 5th. So I have started this one. We have book club tonight. So I've kind of read the first section of this, and so far I'm really enjoying it. It definitely has some like darker themes, and things like that. Our FMC is being bullied, but that's taking it lightly, but being bullied by her stepbrother. And our MMC also has someone in his life who is taking advantage of him. So, I think and then there's this like mystery element of our FMC has done something bad to our MMC. Like, they used to be together. She did something. They've separated. He hates her, but doesn't want anybody else to have her. There's obviously still a lot of chemistry between them. So I'm just excited to see what she did to him and how they reconcile. If they do, I really hope he does something about her complete asshole of a stepbrother, because he is the worst. So that's kind of what I'm like, you know, rooting for at this point in the book. But so far so good. It's very entertaining. Our FMC is a dancer, which is really fun. And yeah, you just kind of follow. So far we've kind of just been following the like 2 friend groups. So our MMC and our FMC met because the FMC is best friends with the MMC's twin sister. So you kind of follow their friend groups around and things like that. And obviously there's like intermingling, and they're like, you know, they grew up together. And so there's a lot of like drama and like who slept with who and like who's been with who and like that kind of thing, which is kind of fun. It's giving a little bit almost like if Magnolia Parks was dark romance, which is kind of fun. So yeah, so far I'm really enjoying it. It's just a cutesy little fun dark romance. So yeah, I will keep you updated. But moving on, the next book that I have actually bumped from my last month's February TBR to this month's March TBR is Blue Sisters. This is my Fable book club pick for the month. It's actually not quite the full month. This is a little bit of a unique situation. This was for February, and then I had a couple people join the Fable, and they asked if I could bump the due date out so that way they could also read this with me, and I said of course. So now I am reading this primarily this month. I'm not gonna lie, I am having a little bit of trouble getting into it. I really enjoyed the first 2 chapters, and then I got to Bonnie's first chapter, and it's a little hard. I have been reading this 1 chapter for like a week, so we'll see. I'm saying this is on my March TBR. I really hope I don't DNF it. I'm gonna try to finish it this week actually, because our like Fable book club due date is March 13th. So I'm gonna try to finish it before then. I'm really trying to be a trooper, but I don't know if it's the themes. I don't know if it's maybe I'm not in the mind like headspace for a literary fiction, but it's just like not grasping me. Maybe I just am like not super into Bonnie's character, because the first chapter is, if we're like excluding the prologue, the first chapter is in Lucky's POV, and I like ran through that. So I'm kind of hoping that once I finish this first chapter of Bonnie's, get into Avery's next chapter, and just like kind of start getting into it, I enjoy it a little bit more. But so far, I don't know. So far, it's not like hooking me, but you know, I am only like this far into it. So we're going to give it the benefit of the doubt and try to get maybe at least 100 pages in. I'm about 50 pages in right now. So maybe we'll try to read a couple more chapters and see if I'm changing my mind. We're still kind of laying the like exposition. So I'm really trying not to judge it. I know at some point the sisters like come together, and I feel like maybe that will like hook me a little bit more. I'm not loving how they're like all spread out right now, but yeah, I kind of bumped this, so I'm counting it on March TBR. And the final book, at least of the books I'm planning to read, was one that Trevor picked out for me. I had him go look at my TBR shelf, which is pretty minimal. I think I have, let's see, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 books on there. So my physical TBR is actually not that extensive. I really try to be good at not like buying a book if I don't know if I'm gonna want to read it. I did have a book of the month subscription for a little while, and I actually still do. I just like haven't gotten a book from them in a hot minute because, again, I just don't like to accumulate books if I don't know if I'm gonna read them. So I kind of want to get through what I have, and then I'll probably you know, kickstart that back up, because I do think it is a really interesting way to like discover new books. But I told him, I was like, look at my shelf, read through everything, and pick a book for me. And this is the one he picked, which is The 3 Lives of Kate K by Kate Fagan. Geez, that's kind of a tongue twister. But first of all, I love the cover of this. I think that was like one of the main reasons why I picked this one, is I just thought it was so interesting. The foiling in this is really cool. But this is about a screenwriter, I believe. Oh, she's the writer of a book, and then the book gets turned into a movie, and and Kate K is not her actual identity. And then the actress that is cast in her movie adaptations wants to meet her, and they kind of, you know, spark some sort of connection, and then Kate basically has to decide if she wants to confess her true identity. She has to come face to face with if she, you know, made the right decision having changed her identity. And I think we kind of follow like her previous life, maybe find out why she changed her identity, things like that. But this sounds really, really interesting. It sounds like a little bit of a mystery with a lot of, you know, potentially maybe even romance, something like that in here. So yeah, this is the final book on my March TBR. So that kind of sums us right up. I do think, you know, I tend to be a little bit of a mood reader, so sometimes I'll set a TBR. I really am trying to stick to it, just because, like I said, I do want to like branch out and try different genres and make sure that I'm, you know, kind of ticking away at my TBR. But like last month when I read From Blood and Ash, and then I was like, I have to read the next one. I just have to do that. And I just jumped right into it. That could happen with any of these. I know Insatiable is a series. Obviously From Blood and Ash is a series. I'm reading part of that. Yeah, and you just like never know what I might be in the mood for. But anything I read, I of course will update you in the next month's wrap up. But aside from that, the next time you'll see me will be in my next reading vlog. That's coming out next week. I'm trying to get a little bit more reading done in it. So far it's got a good little bit about Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, and it's got a little bit about Blue Sisters. So hopefully I can finish Blue Sisters in that vlog, and then maybe even start another book. So that'll be really exciting. So stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed this video, I appreciate you so much being here. Like I said, I'm gonna post videos every Thursday. So if you want to stick around, feel free to subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Like, comment, all of those fun YouTuber things. I always appreciate it so much. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.